Good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining us from around the country, around the world. I'm Jeff Selingo. I will be your host of this webinar this evening. Thank you to College Confidential for partnering with me on this evening. I'm author of Who Gets In and Why: A Year's Inside College Admissions, and I'm also author of this new book, which will be coming out September 9th, 2025. I'll be telling you about a special offer tonight. Dream School, finding the college that's right for you. This evening, the Q&A is open. So if you're on Zoom, go to the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A box there. If you have questions throughout, we're going to try to get to as many as we can later in the hour. So we're going to be on for about an hour tonight. For the first 25 minutes or so, I'm going to be walking through a little bit of a slide deck with some findings from my new book. I'll be giving you a sneak peek of a little bit of what's in it. And then we're going to go to the questions. So please, we got some advanced questions on College Confidential. We're going to be trying to get to many of those. But if you have questions throughout tonight, I highly encourage you to put them in the Q&A. You can see what other people are asking there. You can upvote them if you want to and go from there. We're also recording this session tonight. So everybody who signed up will get access to a recording afterwards in the coming days. So if you end up missing some of it, or often, sometimes those are the questions that people ask in the Q&A, you will be getting tonight, you will be getting a recording of this in the coming days. Again, Jeff Selingo, I've covered higher ed for more than 25 years. I've written now coming up on my fourth book, Dream School, Finding the College that's right for you. And thank you for being here this evening. And I am going to pull up a little bit of our presentation tonight. So we're going to be talking tonight about how to balance fit, cost, and prestige when choosing your college. This presentation, this discussion tonight is really for anybody who has and is a senior in high school. Maybe you're making a last minute decision here by May 1st. Putting your deposit on a school, or maybe you're trying to decide between a couple of different schools. Maybe you're on a wait list for an institution, or maybe you're just beginning your college search as a sophomore or junior in high school. We're going to be talking about all of that. Again, we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can tonight. If we don't, please feel free to follow me on either Instagram or LinkedIn, also on X and Threads. At J Selingo. As I mentioned, I'm really excited tonight that we have a special pre-order offer that we're putting out there this evening. If you pre-order Dream School, the book, tonight while you're on this webinar or right afterwards, just go to jeffselingo.com/dreamschool. And if you order the book from one of any retailer, your local bookstore, Amazon, or any retailer, then use the proof of purchase. There's a form on that page, and just insert your information, including your email address. You will get access to a free downloadable guide that we are going to be releasing this week. And you're also going to have access to 2 exclusive webinars that are only open to those who pre-order. And those webinars will start in May. We'll also have one in July. So you're going to get a copy of this guide that will be released later this week, as well as 2 exclusive webinars. But that's only if you pre-order the book. You can pre-order the book from anywhere, any bookstore, and then fill out the form at jeffselingo.com/dreamschool. And that will give you access to these goodies that we will be giving away. Really excited about this guide that we're going to be giving away. So what are we looking for in a college? We're looking for fit, we're looking about cost, and we're looking around prestige. We're going to be talking about all 3 tonight as we think about college. It's really important to remember we use this word fit. We often use this term perfect fit. There is no such thing as a perfect fit in a college. When we think about college, I think about 3 dimensions of fit. One is academic fit, One is social fit and one is a financial fit. What do I mean by academic fit? Do they have the major that I might be interested in? What are some of the other majors that they might have, just in case I decide to switch? Or do they have minors? Will I be challenged in my courses, or will I swim along with the other students, or will I be way ahead? Sometimes you want to have a good match for a school that has academics that are very similar to what you have in high school. So that's how you think about academic fit. It's not just about the major, but is this a place that I can feel comfortable academically? Am I going to struggle to keep up, or am I going to be way ahead? I like to have places where I'm going to kind of swim along with the pack, and that most of the students are similarly to me academically. If you go to something called the common data set for the institutions that you're looking at, so search on Ithaca College, where I went to my undergraduate college. Ithaca College Common Data Set, you could get a lot of information about the students that they're admitting, the test scores that they have, the high school GPAs, where they rank in the class. You could then get a good sense, not only can I get in that place, but what are the types of students that are going to that place, going to that college academically. So that's the one dimension of fit. The second dimension of fit is social fit. Am I a sporty person, or do I like watching athletics? Is Greek life important to me? And you want to know how many students are participating in Greek life. Do they have a variety of clubs that I might be interested in? Do I want to be in a city? Do I want to be in a rural area? Do I want to be at a big institution or a small institution? Am I going to go far away from home? And do most of the students on that campus go home for the weekend? These are all questions that you want to ask around social fit. And then finally, around financial fit. And this is really important because I think that many people, when they're looking for colleges, when many families are looking for colleges, they focus on those the first two dimensions there, academic and social fit. Financial fit is also absolutely critical, because I think sometimes we think, well, we're going to apply to that college, we're going to see if we could get in, and then we'll figure out how to pay for it. But financial fit is really important. And I'm going to be talking tonight particularly about how we think about financial fit during the admissions process, while we're choosing schools, while we're putting schools on our list. Because if we wait until the end, if you're a senior right now and you're trying to decide between colleges and you finally get your financial aid offer, and you see, well, I can't really afford this, it's too late often now to be applying to colleges. So financial fit has to be part of that element of this fit very early on. So where do you start? So you start by figuring out what you want in a college. So I'm going to give you a sneak peek from Finding Your Dream School, the guide that I will be giving out if you pre-order the book. This is an exercise that I will be taking people through in that guide. And again, you will get that guide for free if you buy the book and you give us a proof of purchase, which filling out the form on our website. These are some of the questions that I'm asking you. If you're a sophomore or junior in high school, what's important to you? Do you want large lecture style classes? Do you want a prescribed core curriculum, or doesn't it matter? So if you don't really care or you don't want it, put it as a 1. If you definitely want it, put it as a 5. And if you don't really know, put it as a 3. This is, again, an exercise that I'm going to take you through in the book. But again, you could look at this tonight. These are some of the questions that you should be asking yourself before you even start to put colleges on a list. What I often find in talking to families and students about their college list is they start to put colleges on a list, names of colleges on a list, before they even decide, do you want to have something close to home? Do you want to be in a rural area? Do you want a big institution? Do you want a small institution? Do you want Greek life? Do you want big time athletics? Do you want an art scene? Do you want students who live on campus all 4 years? These are questions you should be asking yourself before you even put the names of a college on your list, because that's really going to start to shape your list. So I highly encourage you to start to think about, what do you like about high school? Also, start to look at colleges, especially if you're a sophomore in high school. Start to look for colleges that are just within a driving distance of home. If you live near a big public university, if you live near a rural liberal arts college, just go and visit them. Don't worry if it's not a place you don't even want to consider looking at. But what you want to go there for is, what does a big state university look like? So, for example, I live in and around Washington, D.C. I could go within a half hour and be at the University of Maryland, a big public university. I could go a couple hours north, not even an hour and a half north, and I could be at Gettysburg College or Dickinson College, which are small liberal arts colleges, and get a sense of what is that type of place like. You might go to a big state university, the University of Maryland. Again, it may not be a place you want to even apply, but then you say, this is not really for me. Or I could go down to American University or George Washington University, a much bigger urban university in the middle of the city, and say, I want to be in a more rural or suburban feel. And that's what you're trying to do before you start putting the names on that list. And this is where this exercise in particular helps you start to narrow that list of colleges. So what does this fit look like? So first of all, let's start with academic fit. As I said earlier, you want to find a campus where you're going to swim along with the stream academically, but make sure the school is also pulling you along to the finish line. What do I mean by that? Look at the retention rate of colleges and universities. Going back to that common data set I told you earlier, again, you find the common data set by searching for the name of a school and common data set. Most colleges, not all, but most colleges put them up on their website. You're looking at that retention rate. You can also find that retention rate on other websites, including College Navigator, which is a site operated by the Department of Education. You want to pay attention to that retention rate. 81% is the national average. That's the percentage of first-year students who return for their second year. Why is that important? Because it shows if a school has a low retention rate, it shows that they're not great at keeping students who come for their freshman year. That means those students are moving on to do other things, or that they're deciding to transfer institutions. So again, the national average is around 81%. Scrutinized graduation rates and predicted rates. So 50% of bachelor students finish in 4 years. So you might think, oh, wow, I thought this was a 4-year college. Well, 50% of students don't finish in 4 years. Sometimes it takes 62% takes 6 years to graduate nationally. So when you go look at a college, and again, looking at their data, you want to know how often are students retained here? How long does it take them to graduate? And then when you go visit the campus, make sure you ask them, what is the retention or graduation rate for students like me? Graduation rates differ by major. So sometimes if you major in STEM, it might take you longer. Retention rates might be lower in STEM. There's a difference between retention and graduation rates for students who are first in their family to go to college. Men and women have different retention and graduation rates. So when you go to campus, if you're wondering, what is the retention rate in my major? What is the graduation rate in my major? Social, when we think about social fit, look for schools where you're going to kind of find your students, where you're going to find your people, get to know faculty members and connect with mentors. So when you're looking at colleges, every college is very proud of all the professors who have fancy degrees and best-selling books. They may not always be the best teachers. You want to be more concerned with professors who are going to make time for you after class. Or so during the college search, seek out faculty members or coaches or club advisors that you might encounter later on. I always encourage students when they go visit a campus, see if you could sit in on a class that you actually might take as a student. Ask the admissions office or even email a professor in the department if you're going to be an English major, for example, or sociology, or you might be a computer science major. See if you could sit in on a class that you might actually take as a student. And what are you noticing? Does the professor come to class early? Do they stay afterwards? If you have a chance to walk through academic buildings, either on the tour or after the tour, see if professors are in their offices during office hours, or ask your tour guide, how often do you get to know a professor? These are very important things because, again, the social fit of a college, it's absolutely critically important that you find these mentors. Now, these mentors are often faculty members. They're not always faculty members. So ask the tour guide or other students that you encounter or other students you get to know on campus, do they know their professors? Do they know staff members? How about clubs? And how often do they know the advisor to their club. So the other thing that we're looking for is cost. So in terms of fit, so we have academic fit. Now we have the cost and fit in terms of cost. So I want to talk a little bit about some terms that you might come across in the college search, and one is a financial need. And I think it's really important. I often see in College Confidential when I'm looking in the different forums, people often talk about financial need. Financial need is your ability to pay, not your willingness to pay. So you might say, well, my need is great because I only really want to pay X for college. Colleges follow this formula, and the formula is laid out here, right? They're going to add up what their tuition and fees are, their room and board, books and supply. They're going to estimate transportation and personal expenses. All of that comes to a number that's called cost of attendance. You might see that on many websites that you look for at colleges and universities, their total cost of attendance. That's going to be a big number, both for public and private institutions, because it includes all of these costs on the left-hand side of this slide. Then they're going to ask you to fill out financial aid forms. That could be the FAFSA, the federal student aid application. Some colleges also ask for a separate form called the CSS profile. They're going to try to figure out, well, what is your expected family contribution? They don't call it that anymore. They call it the SAI. This is what they're going to figure out based on what information, financial information you're giving them, what your parent and student contribution is. That is subtracted from your cost of attendance, and that is the student's financial need. That is what they believe you need to afford this college or university. Now, this is an important number. It's your need, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get all of that money. Because there are some institutions, you're going to again hear these terms often, that are need blind, need aware, some meet need, and some institutions gap. So I want to walk through all of these terms because you're going to often hear about it during the college search. So the first thing you're going to often hear from colleges and universities is we are need blind or we're need aware. What that means during the college application process, if they're need blind, they don't look at your financial need in making admissions decisions. Now, that might sound great, so we're going to talk about that in a second, but they're not looking at your financial need as part of the admissions process. They're going to admit you based on academic and extracurricular activities, kind of holistic review of your application. Then they're going to separately consider you for financial aid. Some institutions are what are called need aware. What they are doing during the admissions process is they are looking at your financial need because they want to be able to provide you with enough money to meet your financial need. And if they don't have enough money, they will rather reject you, rather deny you admission because they don't want to accept you and then not be able to give you enough money. And that is when they gap you. So there are institutions that are need blind and they meet your full need. In other words, they don't look at your financial need and they meet your need. And we're going to look at that graph in a second to talk about that. There are many institutions, though, that are need blind, but they don't have enough money to meet your full need. So they're going to gap you. What does that mean? Your need might be 20,000, but according to that formula, but they might only be able to give you $10,000 in financial aid, and that means you have a gap of $10,000. Now, as you can see below, the most selective colleges essentially meet 100% of need. So the most selective colleges are also the wealthiest colleges. And if they admit you, many of them are need blind. And if they admit you, they promise to meet your full demonstrated need. As you can see, less selective, both public and private colleges sometimes only meet a 3/4 or 2/3 of your need. So the less selective college that you apply to and get into, you might only get 3/4 or 2/3 of your need met by these institutions. So this is important as you're thinking about the financial fit of a college. Now, this is also the case where the net price of these colleges have all gone up since in the last 20 years. And this is net price. So what's important to remember is that you're going to often see the sticker price of a college. Don't necessarily get scared off by that because many institutions are providing you aid. They're providing merit aid, they're providing need-based aid. We're going to be talking about that in a second. That brings down your net price. But as you can see here, net price by income has been increasing at all income levels, particularly those who are seen as having enough money to pay for college. Now, some schools give out need-based aid. Other schools give out merit aid. Many schools give out both kinds of aid. What's the difference? So need-based aid is exactly as it sounds, right? You're going to fill out that FAFSA. It's going to spit out a formula. It's going to say, Jeff, you need X number of dollars to afford college. And they're going to fill that need through a combination of sources. That could be federal aid, the federal Pell Grant. It could be a federal loan. It could be a private loan through a bank or a parent loan that the school is going to suggest, or it could be a scholarship that the school has that's based on need. Much of that money comes out of their endowment. These are endowed scholarships. Many colleges, though, are increasingly giving out more merit aid. Merit aid is not based on financial need. Instead, it's a coupon, it's a discount. And why would schools do this? So often, what they find is that you can't afford to pay $75,000 in tuition or $30,000 in tuition, but you could bring to the table maybe 20,000 or 30,000 or 40,000, and they want that money. So much like a airline charges different rates depending on where you sit on the plane and how close to the date of travel you're going to buy it, colleges do the same thing. They want to offer aid to students they think can bring some money to the table. And so they think they just need a little bit more of an incentive. And so they offer them a coupon, a discount. Sometimes they put fancy names on these scholarships, the presidential scholarship, but all it is a coupon off the top. And you could see that particularly those less selective or moderately selective colleges, they really engage in merit aid because they can't necessarily fill their classes by students paying full price. More selective colleges can. They don't, as you can see from this, only 7% of privates and 6% of publics give out any sort of merit aid. In my last book, Who Gets In and Why, I call these different types of colleges buyers and sellers. Sellers were the types of colleges that are the most selective institutions here. They had more applications than they knew what to do with, so they didn't need to give out coupons. Less selective colleges were buyers. Doesn't necessarily mean their education was any less so, but they needed to fill seats. They didn't have enough applications to fill those seats, and so they would give out these coupons, these discounts. These were buyers, as I talked about in my last book. I have a full list. You could just go to my website, Jeff Selingo slash buyers and sellers to download this list. But here are some real examples of these institutions and why this is important to think about financial fit early on, because you don't want to create a list that is of all sellers, right? Sellers are those that don't give out these coupons. They're very generous with need-based aid. And so if you qualify for need-based aid, and many times their qualification for need-based aid is very generous, but often you might not qualify for need-based aid. And I often saw, or enough need-based aid, I often saw in reporting the last book, Who Gets In and Why, I saw students who applied mostly to seller schools. Oftentimes they didn't get into them because they're highly competitive, but sometimes they got into them and they didn't get enough aid. And so they wouldn't be able to go. So here's some examples of schools that you might want to think about. So maybe you're thinking about the University of Michigan, only about a third of their aid is awarded without respect to financial need. But then look at the University of Pittsburgh, right? Much higher acceptance rate, and 42% of their aid is awarded without respect to financial aid. University of North Carolina, Clemson, Emory, Tulane, Carnegie Mellon, Case Western, right? These are institutions that are similar in so many ways, but their aid policies are more, if they're a buyer, they're more generous. particularly around merit aid. And so as you're putting together your list, I highly recommend that you consult this buyers and sellers list, because the more buyers that you have on your list, the more likely you are to receive merit aid. And then finally, as we talk about fit, right? So we've talked about academic fit tonight, financial fit. I often hear this term around prestige. Well, I have to go to the most prestigious college that I could get into. I hear this often throughout my discussions with parents and students. Well, first of all, prestige, if we look at the Latin or French root of it, right, it's illusions, it's conjuring tricks, right? Like prestige is really in the eye of the beholder, and that's really important. Often we conflate prestige with the rankings. So even if you think about the rankings are often how we think about colleges and universities. So let's think about the US News and World Report rankings. Those are often the rankings people refer to. I actually got my start covering colleges and universities by working on the rankings. I was an intern at US News and World Report in 1994. And now today, even today, 25% of the US News and World Report rankings are based on a survey of college presidents and college admissions officers. So and that's the biggest weight that they give to the rankings. So what they do every year is they put out a survey. They say to presidents and admissions officers, what do you think about these other colleges? Only about a third of those surveys are even returned. So you don't even have a high response rate. If you want to think about what other presidents or admissions deans that you never even met, what they think of other colleges or universities, that's what the US News and World Report rankings truly measure, right? They measure a lot of other things, but the biggest weight, the biggest factor, 25% of it comes from this survey. So we have to, the new book is really trying to widen our lens on colleges and universities. It doesn't mean you don't apply to Harvard. I hope you do, and I hope you get in. But there are many other colleges and universities out there when we think about higher education. And I want to share something in particular from my book. This is a graphic that comes from Dream School, which is coming out in the fall. We tend to think, well, if I don't go to a prestigious college, I'm never going to get hired by a prestigious firm, or get a great job. So I worked with a company called Lightcast. They know where college graduates go, and we looked at different selectivity bands of colleges. So you can see the top band there were the most elite colleges, those colleges that accept fewer than 20% of students. Then we looked at colleges that accept between 20 and 40%. Then we looked at colleges that accept 40 to 60%. And then we just picked three companies, three Fortune 50 companies, General Motors, Microsoft, and Morgan Stanley. And as you can see, students who even graduate from institutions that accept between 80 and 100% of their applicants. Even those students get to go to General Motors. They go work at Microsoft. They work at Morgan Stanley. And you can see the thickness of the line there shows you how many students or how many graduates of those institutions are going to some of these places. And you could see, for example, even in the Morgan Stanley example, very similar, the black a line as opposed to that bottom line in 80 to 100%. So I think it's really important as we think about where we go to college, that even if you go to a college 40 to 60% band, 60 to 80%, 80 to 100%, you're still going to get hired at these other institutions. So I want to take some questions, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the key takeaways from some of these slides that I showed you tonight. First, fit. We approach the college search as if there is a dream school, one fit, a single choice, a perfect match for us. There isn't. I want to encourage you, and I encourage you in the new book. It's really about finding a place where you can thrive, learn, become the person you're meant to be. It's about considering a range of colleges that both fit your personality and how you like to learn. That's why it's important to go back to that little quiz I'm giving in the book that I'm giving out, in this workbook I'm giving out. Like, what do you like about high school? How do you like to learn? What are the types of places that you like? That is most important about fit. Your definition of fit should not be somebody else's definition of fit. When it comes to college, college is really one of the very few purchases where we choose the seller and commit to buying the products before we nail down how much it's going to cost, right? It's like going to a restaurant and ordering on a menu without prices. That's essentially what we do when we come to college. So it's when we think about college. So it's really important as we're going through the college search, not to say, oh, we're going to apply to these 10 colleges. We'll worry about how to pay for it afterwards. Financial fit is really critical up front. You could use that buyers and sellers list I explained to show where most of the merit aid is going to come from. You can also use something called a net price calculator. Every college has to have a net price calculator on its website. So when you go look at a college, you can look at this net price calculator. You can input a few numbers. It could give you an estimate of how much your net price might be at that college. You need to start to think about how this is going to cost, how much this is going to cost, and how you might pay for it even during the admissions process. And then finally, on prestige. Yes, if we go back to that previous slide, right? Yes, that black line at some places is thicker at Microsoft, for example, than some other institutions and some other employers. We know from research that elite college graduates have a slight earnings edge, but it's only slight on average. They might have a better odds of becoming multimillionaires, but that lottery ticket, everybody gets a lottery ticket in this game of life when you're coming out of college, and you might have the ability, even going to colleges deeper in the rankings, if you find those mentors that I was talking about earlier. If you find those mentors, whether they're faculty members or staff members, those are going to help you get those jobs after college as well. So again, highly encourage you to pre-order the book. You'll have a chance to download the workbook that I was talking about earlier. And we have a bunch of questions that have come in, 11 so far. So please keep asking questions. We've had some earlier questions come in, and I'm going to try to get to as many of those as we can in about the half hour that we have left. So please keep asking questions. We're going to record this for later use, and you could get to many of those. So why don't we start to get to some of the questions that came in earlier this evening on College Confidential. Let's try to get to as many of those as we can right now. So the question that came in earlier on College Confidential, thank you for your last book. It helped us tremendously. Thank you very much. Given the anticipated cliff in applications in 2025, 2026 admission cycle, our current high school seniors who are considering taking a gap year better off reapplying as a freshman or as a transfer student taking community college classes? Sadly, our current high school senior is having to postpone college due to a severe athletic injury. He can't defer the college acceptances he has and will have to apply to a brand new set of cycles for 2025, 2026. We'd welcome your thoughts as reapplying as a freshman or transfer student in 2025-6 might provide a better shot at getting in to more selective colleges. So the question is around the demographic cliff. What's happening right now is the high school graduating class of 2025. So this spring's high school graduating class is the largest college graduating class in some time. And we're going to start to then see a decline in the number of high school graduates through the rest of this decade and well into next decade. There was a dearth in births, a decline in births in the late first decade of this millennium. So 2008, 2009, 2010, and then of course through the next decade, and that's why this person is specific. So in other words, colleges are going to be probably a little bit more desperate to fill their seats. Where is that going to impact? It's going to have a much more of an impact at less selective schools. This person is asking particularly about selective colleges where they have way many more applicants than they have seats. The demographic cliff, because those institutions tend to draw from a broader range of states and draw international students, are probably going to have less of a issue with this decline in high school graduates. So it's not going to have as much of an impact at selective colleges. Less selective colleges, though, are going to want more applications. They're going to want more students. I think they're going to be more generous with merit aid as a result. So if you're interested in, the buyers I was talking about earlier, you want to apply to less selective colleges where you might have not only an admissions advantage, but you might also be able to get more merit aid as a result. In this person, whether they want to be a transfer student. You want to look at how many transfer students that college, how many applications they get and how many they take. Sometimes many colleges run a separate transfer admissions process, and they don't take many transfer applications. They don't get many, and they don't take many. You want to look at their common data set. You want to look at other data on their transfer students. Are they getting a lot of applications? Are they taking them? If they are, and that's a college you're interested in going to, then taking that transfer route is great. If not, reapplying as a first year student reapplying or applying might be the better way to go in that case. It doesn't mean, by the way, that you can't take community college courses, and hopefully some of those credits will transfer. So thank you for that question. Um, what does another question that came in earlier around questions here? What does undergraduate prestige add to a student's college experience? Sometimes it may add. It also may take away, by the way, as we think about the undergraduate experience. In the new book, I interviewed many students who thought they wanted to go to prestigious colleges. Many didn't get in, and they went to other colleges and talked to their friends, or some got into prestigious colleges and they ended up transferring. And the theme that I heard over and over again was the competition once they got to the prestigious colleges. So, well, how does it play into it? They couldn't get into the classes they wanted to. There was more competition for the major. There was more competition for uh, clubs and access to clubs. They always felt like they were grinding it out, and in many cases, these students, were grinding it out in high school, and it just never ended. Many of the students that I talked to for the book were more pleased by looking at colleges deeper in the rankings by being the bigger fish in a smaller sea. And so they were happier at schools that were deeper in the rankings. And so sometimes prestige plays into this achievement culture. To get into a prestigious college, you think in high school, oh, I have to, take all these AP classes. I have to get an A in all these classes. I have to have a high SAT or ACT score. I have to have a high GPA. I have to participate in all these activities. Well, you know what? To just jump through that hoop to get into that prestigious college, the same thing's going to happen when you're at that college. And often you're not going to have access to sometimes the classes you want, the professors you want. The lead character in my book ended up going to a prestigious college. He gets there, he wants to do undergraduate research with a professor, and his advisor says, well, that professor never really even does research with undergraduates. There's a class that he really wants to get into, and the waiting list for that class is so long that his advisor tells him you'll be lucky to get it as a junior, maybe you'll get it as a senior. These are the things, again, that you have to think about when you want, whether what impact that prestige has on the undergraduate experience. We have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to try to move through these as quickly as possible. For families that do not qualify for need-based aid, what kind of cost-benefit analysis would you recommend if a family is only willing to pay for colleges that are worth it, in our opinion? So I would be very upfront. I talk about in the new book what I call our skip-over colleges. So what would end up happening in the past is that if you were not going to get a lot of need-based aid and you applied to colleges, there were a number of colleges that you would apply to, at the very top of the rankings, and you would not get in those. You possibly would not get in those colleges, but if you got in, you'd be willing to pay full price. But if you didn't get in, then there was another level of colleges those colleges expected you to pay full price, even if they weren't at the quote unquote prestige level of those top colleges you applied to and didn't get in. What increasingly is happening, and I saw this in the data that I looked at for the book, is that parents and students are deciding those colleges are just not worth it anymore to pay full price. Now, if I get a discount, if I get a 10 or $15,000 discount on it, maybe those, and I hate to talk about them in levels, but maybe that's those second level colleges are worth it. But instead of paying full price at those second level colleges, I'm going to kind of skip over them. And those might be colleges that are, 40 or 50 in the rankings, for example. And I'm going to skip over them. I'm going to go to colleges, 60, 70, 80, 90, depends on where you're starting. Your starting point is in terms of those rankings. And I might, given my academic profile, I might get a better scholarship at those institutions. Many of those institutions are public universities. I might get into the honors college. And with that honors college comes a scholarship. So the cost benefit analysis is, as you're thinking about these colleges, I would be very specific upfront as you're putting together your college list. This is where I'm willing to pay full price if I get in. This is where I'm not willing to pay full price if I can get in. This is where I'm only willing to go if I get some sort of merit-based scholarship. And these are the schools that I'm putting on my list where I think I could overmatch for merit. These are the buyers on my list. These are places where I think I could get better financial aid. I really like these schools, and these are a better fit potentially financially that I'm willing to skip over that one tier of schools to go to these schools. So as I think about matches in financial aid matching in higher education, that's specifically what I would look at. What impact beyond cost do large named merit scholarships with special opportunities have in weighing the value of a college offer? I will tell you that many of the students that I interviewed for Dream School, they had the option to go to in their mind, very prestigious, highly ranked schools. They gave up on those. They ended up taking the scholarship with the special opportunity, and they never looked back. And why is that? First of all, these special opportunities were only open to them and getting these scholarship. Those special opportunities, for example, might include study abroad. It might come with a fellowship with that study abroad. It might include special access to classes, special dorms, early advance access to classes, other special help with postgraduate fellowships and graduate scholarships, right? All these things that you would never get at that very prestigious college, where, by the way, you're also going to have to pay full price. You're going to have to compete for those opportunities. So many of these students decided, you know what? Not going to compete for those opportunities. I'm not going to pay full price. I'm going to go to this other place. May not be as highly ranked, but I'm going to get access to those special opportunities. And they never looked back. And the other reason they never looked back is they didn't have to go deep into debt. Their parents had, and they had extra money to pay for graduate school. And by the way, they decided to go to a more prestigious graduate school as a result. No guarantees, of course, that you're going to get into that prestigious graduate school, but some of the students I interviewed did. And they had extra money to do that, or they had extra money to go live in more expensive cities to launch their career. Sometimes the launch into postgraduate, whether you're going to graduate school or you're going to a job, it requires money. And many of these students decided to make the trade-off and they decided to save money up front. Take that less quote unquote prestigious, and I hate to use that word, less prestigious school where they were going to get these special opportunities and thus were able to save money and have access to opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. That's a great question, by the way, and I have a whole chapter in the new book on that. The question that came in here is over the last 5 years, students are submitting ever increasing numbers of applications. I'm sure this is a knock on effect of uncertainty from the pandemic. How do parents and students come up with manageable number of schools to apply to without spending insane amounts of money and writing up teen supplemental essays? Going forward, how do high schools, parents, and students work better to manage expectations about what colleges are realistic about students? This is very true, right? I know when I applied to college, I applied to, 3 or 4 colleges because I typed it out on my parents' Smith Corona typewriter at the time. Now it's much easier to apply to colleges because of the Common App. So now students who used to apply to 4 or 5 are now applying to 10 or 12. Sometimes I met a counselor recently who's one of students in their senior class near St. Louis applied to 14 colleges. That was their record this year. And often we are applying to not necessarily a good balance of colleges, but we're applying to many of the same types of colleges, meaning applying to more selective colleges. So how do we kind of push back against this? How do we think about balancing our list? And that is the key here, to balance your list. And what do I mean by balancing your list? You want schools that are a little bit of a reach academically. You want schools that are kind of right in the middle academically, and you want schools that we used to call them safety schools. Nothing really is a safety school anymore, but that are foundational skills, schools that you probably are, you punch above your weight academically and are more likely to get into. What I find often is in a balanced list, you should have essentially a third, a third, a third. You probably should even balance it a little bit more towards those target schools and foundational schools. But what I often find in talking to parents is that they tend to overreach. They tend to not have a balanced list, and when it's not balanced, it tends to have more schools that are a reach for these students. And how are they putting these lists together, right? They're looking at things like Naviance and Score, which they may have at their high school. They can look at scatter plots to see students who had similar academic stats than them from previous classes at those high schools. Did they get into these schools or not? Or they look at the common data set that I mentioned earlier, and they look at how their academic stats line up to the academic stats of students at that institution. But one thing that none of those things take into account is what many schools now are practicing, and I talk about in the new book, called yield management. So they're not necessarily, for example, if you are a out-of-state student applying to a public university in another state, they know that the yield of out-of-state students is sometimes lower. So if they don't think you're going to come, if they don't think you're interested in that school, and how do they determine that? Well, did you go visit? Have you looked at their website? Have you filled out forms? If that admission officer from that institution came to your high school, did you go visit them? If they don't think you're interested in them, they might deny you because they don't think you're going to yield. Yield meaning if you got accepted, you're going to come. You yield. That applicant yields into that institution. And so it's really important that if you're interested in a school that is deeper in the rankings or that you're trying to balance out your list, that the schools that you're interested in, that you show some interest in that. Somebody asked about the easiest way to go from that preferences quiz to identifying real schools. So I showed that preferences quiz early on that is in the workbook from Dream Schools. What you really want to do is what are your non-negotiables? So what is most important to you? So as you're thinking about, do I want large classes or small classes? Do I want a big campus or a small campus? Do I want big time athletics or not? Do I want Greek life or not? Do I want something that's a couple hours from home or a plane ride from home? Do I want a place where students go home on the weekend or not? What you want to know is, okay, what are the real non-negotiables? So if you do that survey, it's 1 to 5, the 5 meaning it's really important to me. You're going to look at all your 5s in that quiz. What do you really value? What are the top 3 things you really value? What are the things that you don't really care about? What are the 1s? Circle those 1s. What are the 3s? I'm also interested in if you take that quiz, what are the 3s? Because sometimes the 3s might, oh, I need to know more about that. I've never really thought about students who leave college on weekends. Maybe I should start asking that question on tours. How many of the students stay here on weekends, or is this what's often called a suitcase school, right? Where there's enough students who live close to home. And then once you identify those things you don't care about on one level, those things are non-negotiables on the other level, that's where you start to then put real schools to that list. So, for example, if a non-negotiable is, I really want Greek life, you're going to start to look for schools that have high percentages of Greek life. If really important to you that you want small classes, you're going to look at class size, you're going to look at undergraduate institutions, liberal arts colleges, smaller colleges, which tend to have smaller class size, right? Once you identify those things that are either non-negotiables or things you don't care about, that's when you can start to put real schools to them. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left tonight, so let me look at some of the other questions that are coming in tonight. Okay, so here's a question that came in earlier this evening. I think this came in on College Confidential before tonight's webinar. How would you advise the parents of a high school senior with a range of options who is leaning towards the seller of the bunch for its very nearby? Seller, by the way, college, my term, that means incredibly popular, has a lot of applicants. They don't give out a lot of aid or need-based, or I'm sorry, merit-based aid. They give out more need-based aid. They're more selective colleges. So those are the sellers. So this person's leaning towards the seller of the bunch. It's very nearby, college town, location, career opportunities, but that gave us no aid. And that we as parents feel of all the schools he was accepted to will be the most intense, competitive, and least supportive. We are concerned that in addition to the financial stretch on the family, that the added cost will be an overcrowded, stressful, and impersonal college experience overall. His top other options are mid-range, selective, somewhat buyer schools with very strong programs in his major, offered him great merit aid. When all is said and done, is it worth it to send him to the school that will cost him 2 to 3 times the more selective school? This is hard, right? Because college is often something we describe as an experienced good, right? You don't know what you're buying until you actually experience it. Sometimes you don't know it until you actually graduate from that school. Was it really worth it? And so in this case, I would try to find students who are in your major. Are there students from your school, your high school in the last 5 or 6 years that have gone to this college, right? Ask them what their experience has been like. Try to find as many students as you can in your major at this school who have relevant recent experience where you can ask your son, in this case, I guess, can ask those kids, what has their experience been like? How cutthroat is it? How hard is the grading? How hard is it to get into these classes? All these things. These are the questions that you want to ask of current students. Often, I think it's going to be hard for the parents to persuade your son or daughter to make a different decision. You want to hear firsthand from the people who are participating in these classes or participating in this experience right now. Um, okay, so here we go. We're going to start seeing more questions in the Q&A. We got a ton of questions tonight. And hopefully I will take a look at some of those and try to answer those in the coming weeks in my newsletter, which you could sign up for. I did an AMA at College Confidential recently. I have a ton of questions that we want to answer from that in the newsletter as well. So we're going to try to get to as many as you can. What is the best way to determine how good a specific program at a college is? Again, I would ask the students in the program. I would look at their outcomes. How do you look at their outcomes? Go to the dean's office or ask the department chair of that department of that major. Go to the career center. Ask how many students in that major, where have they interned in recent years? How many of those internships have turned into jobs? From last year's senior class, how many are employed? Where are they employed? Or are they in graduate school? Often they'll say, well, 90% of our students are employed. But how about my major? How many are employed in my major and where? Just saying 90% are employed is not good enough. You want to know, do faculty actually stay in touch with these graduates so that they know where they're employed? That tells you a lot about the quality of the program. You want to ask students about the professors in that program. Are they good teachers? What is the learning experience like? Are they available are they available at office hours, after office hours? Those are the types of questions that you want to ask. We got a good question here around current climate and reduction in federal funding. Given the current climate and reduction in federal funding, what advice would you give to students, especially international students? How has your advice changed given the potential reduction in international applications? Your advice would be appreciated at this complicated time. I think it's really important to understand what your options are if you don't get a visa. For example, remember, colleges have always accepted international students and they never guaranteed a visa. You could always get denied a visa. But I think you want to ask colleges and universities, if I can't get a visa and can't get in to the country, what are my options? If they say, don't worry about it, that raises a red flag. You want to talk to colleges and universities that are going to give you options. Perhaps you could reapply the following year. Perhaps you could get, perhaps there might be online options for you from that institution. Perhaps they'll work with local institutions in your home country. You want to look for colleges that are going to give you options at this point. Um, we have about 4 minutes left, and so I'm going to try to get to two or three more questions. And again, we'll download all the questions you asked tonight. I'll try to start to answer some of those in my newsletter next, which you could sign up for on jeffselingo.com. How would you tell what the campus vibe is like? Campus tours are so scripted. 100% agree with you. Try to do a couple of things. Pick up the student newspaper. I always find out so much more in the student newspaper than I find out about from a campus tour. Many campus newspapers are online, so you don't even have to go to campus to pick them up often. Go to the student union, see if you can eat in the dining hall at all, or eat on campus. I always try to eat on campus. That means go to campus when there are students on campus. I know often you have to visit campuses during the summer. Try, if you're especially interested in that institution, try to go there when there are students on campus. Try to sit in on a class if you can. Ask at the admissions office or ask a faculty member to sit in on a class. Try to get off, in other words, the campus tour as much as you can to try to get to that vibe. As a counselor, I talk to families who do not get their undergraduate degree in the US. How do you get through to them that there are more than 20 colleges that matter? There's more than I could tell you in 4 minutes. The first half of the new book really talks about the myths that we have around college. Really look at outcomes. Often these families that are getting their undergraduate degree outside the US think that if they only get a degree from those 20 colleges, those are the only places that hire. You want to look at LinkedIn profiles of colleges that are outside the top 20. Where do those people get their degree and where are they working? You're going to see people who got degrees from a variety of institutions who are now working a variety of jobs with a variety of titles. It shows you that there's not just a straight path from a highly selective college to a highly selective employer. Again, more than I could talk about tonight, but in Dream School, we have data from a number of different studies that show that students who go to colleges deeper in the rankings do get great jobs. We have time for one more question, so let me pick one here. Okay, here's a great question. How do you find out if a school is more competitive and cutthroat versus collaborative? What questions and to whom would you recommend to get the real deal? The real deal is students in your major and students who are upperclassmen, juniors and seniors. Try to find those majors. How can you do that? When you go to campus, ask a faculty member, ask admissions to see if they can make connections. See if you can find connections through your high school, students who've gone through those. Try to find out from those majors. First year students may not know yet. You want to ask somebody with experience. How is it different from first and second and third year? Those are the students are going to be able to tell you, near peers are going to be able to tell you the real story as much as you can. So that's really critically important. Again, I really appreciate you joining me tonight on this webinar. I am going to just share one more time what you're seeing on your screen if you pre-order the book right now. You again reorder it from anywhere. You get a free downloadable guide to put the book to work. For now, it's free. You'll get two free exclusive webinars that only to open those to pre-order. All it does is take a chance to pre-order the book from anywhere. Put in your information about that pre-order, and you'll get all these free goodies for doing that now. The book comes out September 9th. We're going to be doing more with College Confidential, so be sure to watch the College Confidential forums to see when we're going to be doing another Ask Me Anything. And I'm also, as I said, we didn't get to all the questions tonight, but I'm going to try to get to as many in the next couple of weeks and the next couple of months in my newsletter. Thank you for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking an hour out of your time tonight. So many good questions. But I always tell people in terms of the college search, control what you can control in this search. That includes how much you can really afford, where you can apply, your high school grades, your high school activities, and then let the chips fall where they may. There are 1,400 four-year colleges and universities out there. There are thousands of other two-year colleges out there. There are not just 20, 25, 50 schools out there. There are thousands, hundreds of great places. And they all, many of them want you. I always tell also students, love those colleges that love you back. And appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for joining us. If you didn't join us live and are watching this on the recording, thank you for watching this and have a good night, everybody. Good luck.